Chapter 1. The Forbidden Mountain. A dead planet, a desperate man. The planet Sci-Fi was a graveyard of forgotten civilizations, a place of whispers and dark legends, where even the boldest explorers hesitated to land. For over 1,000 years, it had remained uninhabited, a relic of the past, orbiting a dying star on the fringes of known space. Its surface was a desolation of cracked rock and eroded ruins, once the pinnacle of a mighty empire, now nothing more than dust and decay. Callum Voss didn't care about legends. What he cared about was fixing his ship before he froze to death. "LYNX, run another scan for anything useful," Callum muttered, adjusting his oxygen feed as he descended from his ship, the Vanguard's Edge. A robotic voice crackled through his visor's comms. "Captain, this planet is classified as highly hazardous. I must repeat my recommendation. Departure is advised." Callum snorted, shaking his head as he slung his rifle over his shoulder. "Yeah? Well, unless you've figured out how to repair a hypercore stabilizer with optimism, we're stuck here." His AI assistant, LYNX, had been a reliable companion throughout his years as a scavenger and explorer. It was smart, efficient, and annoyingly cautious. "The chances of finding compatible parts on this planet are below 12%, LYNX continued, its tone bordering on exasperated. Callum ignored it. He knew the risks. He had made a career of digging through dead worlds for salvageable tech, trading scrap from forgotten empires for enough credits to keep himself flying. It was a tough life, but it was his life. The alternative was being stuck in a corporate colony, working for some bureaucratic overlord. Yeah, screw that. The wind howled across the surface as Callum trudged through the rocky wasteland, his boots crunching against ancient debris. The sky above was perpetually gray, dark clouds swirling like a restless storm. Something about the air felt wrong, unnatural. The remains of what had once been towering cities stretched in the distance, massive, skeletal structures of obsidian metal, half buried in the sands of time. His HUD scanned them automatically, displaying fragmented data signatures that suggested power sources still remained, hidden beneath the surface. Then, something caught his eye. A massive mountain, unlike anything else on this planet. The rest of Sci-Fi was a ruin, yet this mountain was untouched. No erosion, no crumbling stone. It stood tall and unyielding, as if something had kept it preserved throughout the millennia. And at its base, an entrance, a dark maw carved into the rock. "LYNX, Callum murmured, eyes narrowing. "Are you seeing this?" The AI hesitated before responding. Analyzing. "Negative. This structure does not match any known historical records of Sci-Fi. "That's impossible," Callum said. Everything on this world had been catalogued, abandoned, or destroyed. Yet here was a sealed structure, unmarked by time. If he hadn't found it by accident, it might have remained hidden forever. Curiosity burned in his chest. "Guess we're taking a look," he muttered. "Captain, I strongly advise against this course of action dash." Callum ignored the warning and stepped inside. The silent tomb. Darkness swallowed him as he entered the structure. His shoulder lamp flickered on, casting a pale glow over the massive corridor ahead. The walls were smooth, not natural stone, but crafted, lined with veins of an unknown metal that pulsed faintly, as if alive. The deeper he walked, the more the silence became oppressive. Something was watching him. The sensation slithered down his spine, primal and instinctual. His HUD flickered erratically, interference disrupting his scanners. "Unknown energy detected," LYNX announced, its usual monotone tinged with unease. "Tell me something I don't know," Callum muttered, tightening his grip on his rifle. Then he saw it. At the very heart of the mountain, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, stretching high above him like the interior of a cathedral. And at its center, a colossal black monolith, wrapped in crimson chains that pulsed with eerie light. And bound to it, a woman. The chained goddess. Callum froze. She was suspended against the dark stone, her body wrapped in golden etchings that glowed softly, like celestial markings. Her skin shimmered, a pale silver blue, and her long, flowing hair drifted as though caught in an invisible current. But it was her eyes that arrested him. Violet, piercing, ancient, eyes that had seen centuries pass like fleeting moments. And she was awake. Her gaze locked onto him, burning with something between hope and fury. "Mortal," she whispered, her voice soft but carrying the weight of eternity. "You are not supposed to be here." Callum's breath caught in his throat. "What are you?" She shifted slightly, the chains glowing brighter at her movement. The markings on her body flared, as if responding to his presence. "I am Nyxera," she murmured, "and I am bound by fate." His HUD flickered violently, red warnings flashing as LYNX struggled to process the readings. "Captain, her energy levels are off the charts. Whatever she is not human." Callum stepped closer, his fingers hovering near the glowing shackles that held her. "Who did this to you?" Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "The ones who feared me." Callum's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but something stronger, some deep, gut-level feeling urged him forward. He reached out and touched the chains. The unleashing. A blinding shockwave of energy erupted from the monolith, slamming into Callum like a tidal wave. The entire mountain trembled, cracks splintering through the obsidian stone. The chains snapped, one by one, disintegrating into dust. Nyxera collapsed forward, her breath ragged. Her violet eyes lifted to meet his. "You fool," she whispered, her voice trembling with something between awe and dread. The entire planet shook as alarms long dormant suddenly roared to life. In the vast emptiness of space, something ancient stirred, and across the galaxy, powerful forces became aware of her return. Chapter 2. The Awakening War. The moment the universe changed, the air around them crackled with energy, charged with something ancient and unrestrained. Callum's mind reeled as he stumbled backward, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. The chains were gone. He had done the impossible. Nyxera, the prisoner of centuries, was free, and the universe was already reacting. The very foundations of the mountain shuddered as alarms long dormant began to wail, echoing through the ancient corridors. The strange veins of energy running through the walls surged, flickering wildly as if something deep within the structure had been disturbed. Nyxera's body trembled, golden markings flickering across her silver-blue skin. She clenched her hands into fists, feeling power surge through her once more, unrestricted for the first time in eons. Then, she looked at Callum, and for the first time in over 1,000 years, she took a breath without chains binding her. "You," she whispered, stepping forward with uncertain grace, her limbs still weak from her confinement. Callum swallowed hard, gripping his rifle tighter. "Yeah, that just happened." Nyxera stared at him, something indiscernible in her gaze. Then, the walls rumbled. Something deep within the mountain was waking up. "We must leave." Her voice carried urgency, her violet eyes snapping to the jagged cracks now forming in the stone walls. Before Callum could ask why, the world answered for him. A deafening roar echoed through the chamber. And then they came. The sentinels of the ancients. From the cracked stone, machines emerged, sleek, skeletal automatons, their obsidian-black armor glowing with the same crimson energy as the broken chains. Their heads were featureless except for pulsing red cores, resembling burning eyes. They moved with inhuman grace, their clawed limbs twisting unnaturally as they crawled down the walls. Callum swore under his breath. "I really hate ancient security systems." Nyxera's expression hardened. "They were programmed to prevent my escape. Now that I am free." She raised a hand. The air rippled as her fingers curled into a tight fist. The first automaton stopped mid-motion, convulsing violently. Its body imploded, collapsing into itself as if crushed by an unseen force. The others did not pause. They lunged. Callum reacted fast, his instincts honed by years of survival. His rifle lit up the chamber with flashes of plasma, each shot finding its mark, but they barely slowed the machines down. "These things are resilient," he shouted. Nyxera's lips twisted into a smirk. "You rely too much on crude weapons." She extended both hands. A wave of raw, gravitational energy erupted outward. The air warped, space itself distorting as the entire room collapsed inward on itself, for an instant crushing every last sentinel into compressed fragments of metal and shattered energy cores. Silence followed. Callum exhaled sharply, lowering his rifle. "Remind me never to piss you off." Nyxera tilted her head. "Wise." Then, her gaze snapped upward. We are not safe yet. Above them, the ceiling split apart, revealing the darkened sky of Zephyr 9. And from the heavens, ships descended. The galactic alarm has been triggered. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the Varan Dominion was a colossus of military power, a galactic empire that ruled over 1,000 worlds with an iron grip. Its capital, Varos Prime, was a sprawling fortress of steel and glass, a megacity stretching across an entire planet. At its heart, the command center of the Dominion's military flared to life. Sir, a Priority 1 disturbance has been detected on Zephyr 9. Lord General Kale Draken turned from his command deck, his sharp crimson eyes narrowing. Elaborate. The officer swallowed. An ancient containment structure has been breached. Energy readings are off the charts. And sir, it's the signature of the Eternal One. A cold silence settled over the bridge. Kale's grip tightened on the armrest of his command chair. Deploy a fleet. Immediately. Escape from the dead planet. Back on Zephyr 9. The sky was now filled with descending warships, sleek black vessels bearing the emblem of the Varan Dominion. Their engines glowed like dying stars, casting ominous light across the ruins. Nyxera stiffened, her gaze locked on the sky. They came. Faster than I expected. Callum swore. Yeah? Who the hell are they? Nyxera's eyes darkened. The ones who put me in chains. The ground trembled as the ships began their descent. Callum's HUD flashed warnings, detecting scanning beams sweeping over the area. We need to move. Now. Nyxera turned toward him, eyes glowing. I can get us off-world, but I need a ship. Callum hesitated. Then, he made a choice. Follow me. They ran. The last flight of the Vanguard's Edge. Callum's ship, the Vanguard's Edge, was parked at the far edge of the canyon. A mid-class explorer vessel. It wasn't designed for combat, but it had speed, and right now, that was all that mattered. As they raced across the terrain, the first Varan dropships landed behind them, soldiers pouring out in dark armor, weapons raised. Callum didn't look back. Lynx, get the ship ready for emergency takeoff. Understood, Captain. Fuel reserves are critical, but thrusters are warming up. Nyxera leapt ahead, her form blurring with unnatural speed. She raised her hand, sending a shockwave of force behind them, hurling debris and soldiers alike into the air. Keep moving, she commanded. Callum didn't need to be told twice. The Vanguard's Edge was already powering up as they reached it. Callum slammed his hand against the panel, the boarding ramp hissing open. They jumped inside just as the first plasma bolts whizzed past them. Strap in, Callum shouted, throwing himself into the pilot's seat. The ship shuddered as it powered up, thrusters firing with a roar. Outside, the Varan ships were closing in, targeting locks engaged. Nyxera stood behind him, her hands gripping the back of his chair. Can we escape? Callum gritted his teeth. We're about to find out. He punched the throttle. The Vanguard's Edge lifted off, rocketing into the sky, the mountain shrinking beneath them. But as they soared upward, a massive battleship emerged from hyperspace. Its silhouette blocked out the stars. Nyxera's expression darkened. They're not letting us go that easily. Callum's heart pounded. He had freed a prisoner of legend. And now, the entire galaxy wanted them dead. Chapter 3. The Betrayal of the Stars. The Great Chase begins. The Vanguard's Edge trembled violently as Callum pushed the ship to its absolute limit. The thin atmosphere of Zephyr 9 burned against the hull as they ascended into the black void of space, the engines screaming from the stress. Warning. Enemy ships in pursuit. Incoming weapons lock detected. Lynx's monotone voice filled the cockpit. Callum's hands flew across the controls, diverting all available power to shields and maneuvering thrusters. Outside the viewport, the massive Varan battleship loomed like a floating monolith, its silhouette eclipsing the distant stars. Smaller fighter craft poured from its underbelly, swarming toward them like a metallic swarm of wasps. Nyxera stood behind him, eyes glowing as she scanned the enemy fleet. They're deploying an interdiction field, she said, her voice sharp. They mean to keep us from escaping into hyperspace. Callum cursed. Great. Any chance you can do that magic space warping thing and get us out of here? Nyxera shot him a look. I am still weak from centuries of imprisonment. Manipulating gravitational fields on a large scale would be dash. A sudden explosion rocked the ship. The shield alarms wailed. Callum yanked the controls, the ship rolling sharply as a plasma bolt barely missed their thrusters. The enemy fighters were closing in, their sleek, dagger-like forms darting through the void with predatory precision. "We're not going to make it if we don't shake these guys," Callum shouted. Nyxera clenched her fists. The golden glyphs along her arms flickered, as if trying to ignite. "Then take us to a location where I can fight." Callum's mind raced. No hyperspace escape. No backup. No safe haven. But there was one option. A graveyard of warships, an old battlefield left abandoned after the last Galactic War. No one dared enter it anymore, not because of the wreckage, but because of what lay within. Anomalies. Callum gritted his teeth. "If we can't outrun them, we'll lose them in the Ghost Belt." Nyxera narrowed her eyes. "That place is dash." "Yeah, I know." Callum punched the engines to full throttle. "But they don't." The ship shot forward, heading straight for one of the most cursed places in the galaxy. The Graveyard of Titans. The Ghost Belt was a stellar graveyard, the remains of one of the largest battles in galactic history. It was a maze of shattered battleships, broken dreadnoughts, and drifting debris, all caught in a chaotic maelstrom of gravitational anomalies left behind by the war. Even the Varan Dominion hesitated to enter it. But Callum Voss wasn't Dominion. The Vanguard's edge plunged into the wreckage field, weaving through the ruined husks of warships long forgotten. Massive, broken hulls floated in eerie silence, some still flickering with the dying embers of long-lost power cores. "Incoming vessels are hesitating," LYNX announced. Callum smirked. "Guess even the Great Dominion pilots don't like ghost stories." Then a deep pulse echoed through the ship systems. A warning. A disturbance. Nyxera stiffened. "Something is dash." Before she could finish, the wreckage around them moved. A Varan fighter on their tail suddenly veered off course, spiraling violently before collapsing in on itself, as if dragged into an invisible force. Callum's HUD lit up with red warnings. Unidentified energy signatures detected. The Ghost Belt was waking up. Something still lived here. Nyxera turned sharply to Callum. "You must get us out of here now." Callum grimaced. "Not an option until we lose them." More Varan fighters entered the field, careful but determined. They spread out, using their superior maneuverability to avoid the warped gravity pockets that littered the graveyard. Callum swerved hard, dodging between two shattered battlecruisers, using the debris for cover. Then he saw it. A dark shape, deep in the field. Something massive. Something watching. And the moment his ship's sensors registered its presence, the entire graveyard came alive. The Forgotten Sentinel, a colossal warship, hidden in the depths of the wreckage, suddenly activated. It was not Varan. It was something older. "What in the hell is that?" Callum shouted. Nyxera's face darkened. "That is not a ship." The ancient titan moved. Metal groaned as its form unfolded, revealing a skeletal construct, half machine, half energy, its eyes burning with forgotten fire. And it spoke. "You have awakened the chains." Callum's blood ran cold. Nyxera's fists tensed. "It is one of the old sentinels. They were placed here to contain beings like me." The sentinel's burning gaze turned toward Nyxera. "The Eternal One has returned. The cycle begins anew." Then it raised its arm, a beam of raw void energy forming at its fingertips. "Callum, move." Callum didn't hesitate. He punched the thrusters just as the sentinel fired. A searing blast tore through the wreckage, obliterating everything in its path. The shockwave sent the Vanguard's edge spiraling, alarms blaring as Callum fought to regain control. The sentinel advanced, and the Varan ships turned on it. "All units, focus fire. That is not one of ours." The Dominion forces opened fire on the ancient machine, their plasma rounds hammering into its metallic hide. But the sentinel barely acknowledged them, its focus locked on Nyxera. She must not be freed. Callum's mind raced. There was only one way out of this. They had to use the chaos to escape. Nyxera gritted her teeth. "I can create a short-range warp jump, but I need you to keep us alive for 30 seconds. Callum grimaced. "That's a long 30 seconds. Nyxera closed her eyes, her body glowing as she reached out to the fabric of space. Callum pushed the engines to their breaking point, weaving through the battle as the Sentinel and the Varan fleet clashed. 15 seconds. Nyxera's voice echoed. The sentinel turned its gaze back to them. No, she must not escape. It fired. Callum jerked the ship sideways, but the blast clipped their engines. Critical damage detected. Link shrieked. The ship lurched, flames erupting in the rear. 5 seconds. The sentinel raised its hand again. A blinding flash. And then, silence. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the Vanguard's edge tumbled out of warp, battered and barely holding together. Callum coughed, blinking through the smoke in the cockpit. Nyxera stood, her breath heavy. She turned toward him, violet eyes burning. You have done something dangerous, Callum Voss. You have freed me. And now the entire galaxy will come for us. Callum exhaled. Yeah, he muttered, rubbing his temple. I get that a lot. The chase had only just begun. Chapter 4. The Human's Choice. A dying ship, a hunted woman. The Vanguard's edge tumbled through deep space, flickering in and out of failing stability. The ship was barely holding together, the hull scorched and battered, engine trails flickering like dying embers. Inside, Callum Voss struggled to keep the vessel from completely breaking apart. Alarms blared through the cockpit. Warning, primary thrusters failing. Hull integrity compromised. Life support at 37%. Callum grimaced. LYNX, give me some good news. I calculate a 14% probability of survival. Yeah, that's what I thought, Callum muttered. Nyxera stood at the viewport, her violet eyes fixed on the swirling stars outside. Her body trembled with exhaustion, golden glyphs flickering dimly across her arms. You need a place to land, she said softly. Callum nodded, his grip tightening on the controls. Yeah, except we just pissed off the biggest empire in the galaxy and woke up a literal god-killing machine. So safe havens? Not exactly abundant. Nyxera turned, studying him. I know of a place. Callum arched a brow. You know of a place? A world long hidden. One that may hold the answers we need. Callum sighed. I'm gonna regret this, aren't I? Nyxera's lips curved ever so slightly. Set a course for the world of Edriska. The lost world of Edriska. Edriska was a world lost to time. A planet that once thrived before the rise of the great empires. A place where those who knew too much or were too dangerous were sent to be forgotten. As the Vanguard's edge limped into orbit, Callum's HUD flickered with ancient transmissions, broken signals that had not been touched in 1,000 years. Nyxera's gaze darkened. This was once my home, she said. Callum blinked. Wait, you lived here? She nodded, stepping toward the viewport. Before I was betrayed. Before they took everything from me. The ship descended through dense storm clouds, breaking into the atmosphere. Below, Edriska stretched endlessly, a landscape of golden ruins and deep obsidian spires, swallowed by thick, alien forests. Callum exhaled. Yeah, definitely gives cursed planet vibes. Nyxera closed her eyes. There is something here. Something that will tell us why I was sealed away. Callum adjusted their descent. Then let's hope it's worth almost getting atomized by a god-killing machine. The ship shuddered as it touched down on an overgrown landing pad. Outside, something stirred. The forgotten prophecy. The ruins of Edriska were eerily silent. The massive stone structures loomed over them like the bones of dead gods, whispering of a time when this world had been something greater. Nyxera led the way, her presence strangely attuned to the environment. The golden etchings on her skin glowed brighter the deeper they walked. Then they found it. A vast hollowed-out temple, deep in the heart of the ruins. The walls were covered in glyphs, ones that Callum couldn't read, but Nyxera could. Her fingers traced the ancient markings, and as she did, the temple stirred. The glyphs lit up, golden light flooding the chamber. Then a holographic figure appeared, an elderly alien, with hollow eyes and a voice that echoed through the room. To the one who has freed the Eternal One, you have set into motion the final fate of the stars. Callum exhaled sharply. I don't like the sound of that. The hologram continued. She was not imprisoned for conquest, not for power, but because she was the key to something greater, a force that even the gods feared. Nyxera froze. I was a key, she whispered. The hologram's hollow gaze turned toward her. You were a gatekeeper, child, the last of your kind, and those who bound you feared what lay on the other side of the door. Callum's stomach turned. What the hell does that mean? The hologram's voice grew solemn. The door is now open, and the thing that waits beyond is coming. A deep tremor shook the temple, and far above them, something in the stars awakened. The arrival of the end. Across the galaxy, warships and empires trembled as a signal pulsed through the void. The sentinel they had fought in the Ghost Belt had not been an executioner. It had been a warden. And now that Nixera was free, its final message had been sent. The lock is broken. The Eternal One walks once more. Commence the awakening. And somewhere, in the black heart of space, something answered. The choice of a human. Back on Edriska, Callum and Nixera stood at the temple's entrance, watching as the sky above them burned. Ships were coming. Varen Dominion fleets. Rogue warlords. And something else. Something much older. Nixera's violet eyes burned. I was never meant to be a conqueror, she said. I was meant to be a sacrifice. Callum stared at her. Then why did they imprison you? Her voice was quiet. Because they feared I would make the wrong choice. A pause. Because they feared I would choose to live. Callum exhaled. Then what do you want? Nixera turned to him. Her lips parted, as if she had never considered that question before. And as the sky lit up with incoming war, she reached forward and placed a single hand on his chest. I want to live. Callum grinned. Then let's make sure you do. And together, they prepared to face the fate of the stars. Epilogue. The unfinished story. No one knows exactly what happened on Edriska. All the galaxy knows is that when the warships arrived, when the Dominion, the warlords, and the forces of the old gods themselves came for Nixera, something changed. No one saw the Eternal One again. No one saw the human who freed her. But across the stars, whispers persisted. Of a wanderer, a woman with violet eyes, whose name was feared and worshipped alike. And of a man, reckless and laughing, always one step ahead of fate itself. Some say they died. Some say they became something more. But in the end, they were never found again. Because they had already chosen their own destiny. And the galaxy? The galaxy would never forget.